right, here we go. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bid Nerds. My name is John Polnick, and I am coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada, in beautiful downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. We are right here on the Fremont Street Experience, and it's time to introduce my partner, Michael Deeb. Maybe if he comes up, there he is. All right.
Good morning,
boy,
JP.
that technically did not work at all the way I intended it to. But that's because he's coming from San Francisco. I'll blame him.
That's me.
But glad to have you here, Mike. The results from the focus group have come in, and they've told us that our producer is testing much higher than either one of us. So it's important that I introduce our producer, Patootie, who is here today, and everyone just wants to see her. At least, again, it's the focus group. That's what the focus group is.
That's right.
I'm sure that's real data. Oh, you know what happened?
Yeah.
I did all that, and nobody saw it. There it is. There's Patootie. There is the actual producer of the show. She's got her Christmas bow on.
For those of you scoring this at home, Patootie has more followers than John and I combined. So there you go.
It's true.
Yesterday was really interesting. I don't know if I scored it, but I'm not sure if you saw this. But you and I, we review 5 cars every day, and yesterday we tied because one of the cars landed right in between the middle of our 2 bids. So we split one. Right? We split one, and we each won 2. So we tied yesterday. So it's heating up here at the end of the year.
All right, it is. Well, let's get to it then. Let's get to the cars.
Cool. Let's start on cars and bids, and we're going to review one of my favorite cars. This is an AP1 Honda S2000 offered to us out of Houston, Texas. This car is spa yellow, has 40,000 miles on it, and judging by the description from Doug Demuro, this is just kind of a no stories, lightly used car, sort of the typical, wear and tear on the driver's seat. The 2001s were the last year to have a plastic rear window in the soft top, and that's starting to yellow a little bit. But there's no real modifications outside of like a change of the head unit to the stereo. AP1s are really cool cars. I have maintained that you get an AP2 if you want to drive it every day. You get an AP1 if you want to drive it occasionally, and you're speculating on the value of these kind of going through the roof, which I think these Honda S2000s are future classics. This is a high revving 2-liter 4 that makes about 240 horsepower. AP1s have a quicker steering ratio and no traction control. It is just man and machine, and I love these cars. This is a really clean one out of Houston, Texas. There you go. What do you think, JP?
Man, it's hard to consider anything in this price range that's better. If you want a sports car, you pretty much get one of these. It's kind of like, all right, so many people say, oh, should I get a 911 or should I get a Porsche or whatever? Yeah, I mean, of course, 911 it's a different animal, but you're not going to get a really good 911 in this price range, or at least it's going to be much more difficult, and it's a much more difficult car to really get the value out of unless you really know 911s. So this car is like the ultimate like first sports car or track car, or and it's so much better than a Miata. I mean, Miatas are great too but that's because they're really, really inexpensive. The thing I'm concerned about on this car is that, where it is right now. Okay, we're on Cars and Bids. This is an auction site. The car is physically in Texas, which is great. That's a good spot. That it's probably not rusty, and it's close enough to the rest of the country. So anyone that's possibly interested in this car could either fly out and drive it home or have it shipped, and it's not going to be too horribly expensive.
Right.
But here's the thing, there was one of the pictures showed that the convertible top had some holes in it. So It's like, okay, that's not that big a deal. I think normally, like if this car were in Craigslist or OfferUp or Auto Trader or whatever, it'd be very easy to be just like, oh, it needs a needs a top or whatever, because that's probably $1,000, $2,000. But I think that's really, really, really going to hurt this car, combined with horrible pictures, obviously just snapshots in the driveway.
Yeah, it's true. And that's probably why this car is kind of sort of amateur on Cars and Bids, instead of trying to make a splash and reach for the values that AP1s are getting. I mean, otherwise, this is a really clean car. But my guess is the kid needs to get off of it, and they're just trying to, he's just trying to cash it out and not spend the money on it.
Does that give you an indication of how they treated the car otherwise?
It's possible. The only thing, the only argument to that, JP, is it's a Honda, and even if
who cares how they treated it? Yeah.
Well, kind of. I mean, look, these motors are hand built, but it's still a Honda, and they've just got bulletproof reliability. And I had a problem with my convertible top on my AP2. I took it to the dealer under warranty, and they changed it out almost while I waited. I dropped it off and picked it up a couple hours later with a brand new top. It's an easy job. So there you go.
I will tell you this, as a convertible person. I mean, I'm everybody knows me that knows that I'm into convertibles. It's also possible that they're kind of the person that always has the top down and just doesn't care what the car is like with the top up. Because really, who the hell cares? Right. This car is to be enjoyed with the top down.
Yeah, and again, if this car belonged to, Don from Seattle, he'd have to get the top fixed. If it belongs to DP in Vegas, it doesn't matter.
All right. 3 hours to go. Sitting at 16.5 right now with 16 bids. Out of Texas, what is your bid?
$21,000. I think this car could still.
I'm sorry. You cut out, buddy.
$21,000. I still think this car can break 20 grand even here on Cars and Bids. It's got a little bit of action, and it's coming out of a decent area of the country to pick your car.
Yeah, this one could be an underdog that swings big at the end. It does only have 40,000 miles. That's a pretty big deal. But I'm going to go under. I'm going to say it fizzles out. I feel like Cars and Bids this week has been a little soft. So I'm going to go 20.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to say it just makes 20.
Undercut.
All right, undercut you. Sorry.
I saw this. Dirty pool.
Well, when we looked at it when I was pulling the pictures down last week, I was thinking, oh man, maybe this thing makes 17. So I'm surprised it's even at 16.5 now. So, anyways, moving on.
Yeah, it's an attractive color. So let's jump over to Bring a Trailer, and I want to introduce our audience to a car I am fast becoming a fan of. This is a 1974 Alfa Romeo Montreal, and I actually know this car. So I have he's basically a cousin to me. His name is Rafi Nigerian. He has a shop called The Pit Stop, and it's here in the San Francisco Bay Area in Brisbane. And Rafi is just a guru, especially with Alfas. He works on all kinds of cars. But Rafi is the one that refreshed and put this car together. And the current owner claims to have had it for about 16 years. Earlier this year, prior to March, if you know what I'm implying, this car was on Hemmings, and it was listed for about, I think, $130,000. So it was either, I don't know, like 125, 130, or 130, 135, something like that. And in the ad, he claims that Rafi Nigerian at the pit stop. Actually, I called the guy, and he told me that Rafi had built the car. And it's really interesting because the wheels that are on this car are magnesium Campagnolos that came off of the Ferrari Dino that was offered with chairs and flares. So the chairs were the Daytona seats, the flares were little winglets over the fender wells, and they were to accommodate these 14 by unusual 7.5-inch wide magnesium Campagnolo wheels, replacing the 14 by 6.5-inch aluminum wheels, also made by Campagnolo, but much heavier and narrower wheels. So little touches like that kind of give it away that it's a Rafi build, being able to fit these Dino wheels to the car. If you're not familiar with the Montreal, this is a car that Alfa built on the GTV platform. It has a live rear axle, a 5-speed manual. It's got disc brakes. It's probably a stretch version of the platform, but this car utilizes a 2.6 liter 4-cam V8 spike of fuel injection. And JP, if you would show our audience the Alfa 33 Stradale. Alfa was racing in the late 60s and early 70s, and they built 18 cars with this 2-liter quad cam V8 in this motor. This car weighed 1,500 pounds and made 230 horsepower. out of a motor that is essentially the same block that is in this Montreal.
Wow.
Those Alfas right now, I think they bring about, I think it's something unusual, but it's, I think, around $4 or $5 million if you can find one, because they only built 18 worldwide. The motor that's in the Montreal is the same block, but it's been bored out to 2.6 liter. It only makes 200 horsepower, but the car weighs 2,800 pounds. So if you go back to 1974 and compare this to, say, a 911S that was maybe a 25 or 2,600 pounds and made 160 horsepower, you can begin to sort of estimate the performance that this car has. Maybe a couple hundred pounds more, but it made 200 horsepower from a V8 with a 5-speed. And these cars are just beautiful. Marcello Gandini worked for Bertoni at the time. He is responsible for penning or designing this car. The NACA duct on the front hood, the little louvers above the headlights that remove when you turn the lights on, those little louvers move out of the way. It's a car that's aged really well. And while I wasn't a big fan of it, say 20 years ago, I really appreciate the racing history that this car has with that motor. The lines have aged really well. It's a very classic old Bertoni design. And this car is offered out of LA, California by the owner that's had it for a few years now. And it's at $83,000, I think, on like 21 bids. And there you go. I think the reserve, though, is probably going to be quite a bit higher, and I'm not sure if it's going to make it. But that's the thing. What do you think? Do you remember this car? Do you have a feeling about it one way or the other? It's a very
I have to admit, design. I know nothing about these, and when I saw it come up, I was just shocked. It just jumps out at you. It really, I think, to the uninitiated, I think if you're driving down the road and you know a little bit about classic European cars, you're like, oh hey, there's a Mira, and then you're like, wait, you gotta like, oh wait, no, that's not at all a Mira. What the hell is that? And because that was what I mean. I think it's the color combinations, the swoop of that rear, or the swoop of the door, the window, the way it kind of swoops up with that angle, and the vents. I mean, I think this is one of the most beautiful cars we've ever reviewed ever.
Right. And so we talked about, we were going to review one the other about a month ago, and we had technical difficulties. We didn't go on air that day. And I had told you on the phone when we decided we weren't going to do the show that the guy who designed the Mura. He designed the Scirocco. He designed the Golf. That's Marcello Gandini, a famous designer from an era that produced a lot of cars you and I grew up with, and I imagine a lot of our audience. So when you glance at this and you see Mura, that's not by accident. It's the same. It came from the same stroke. Really neat car. Do you remember Charlize Theron did a movie called Atomic Blonde, where she was a spy in Germany.
Super 80s retro movie, yep.
Yeah, James McAvoy drives a 964 C2 Turbo. At the end of the movie, she gets dropped off at the airport in a black Montreal, and it makes this really cool cameo with her getting out of the car and getting on a plane with John Goodman to end the movie. And I just thought that was the coolest cameo ever, because it's just such an unusual car. But anyway, there you go. Here's a really cool one in Southern California. What do you think it might be worth?
Did you already start? Yeah, go ahead and start. I mean, honestly, this one isn't even fair, because I have no idea.
Yeah,
I only know what you've just told me.
Yeah, so nice Montreals are starting to bring $100,000. So you could pick up on a deal. You could pick up a nice one for $80,000 to $85,000. This is, I think, a really great driving one. It might not be a Concours car, but if you and I were to own it, we would want our car to drive a little better, and that's what this one is. My guess is Rafi's probably squeezed a few more horsepower out of it, and the wheels and tires are definitely an upgrade. The exhaust sounds good. If you watched any of the videos, I encourage our audience to do so. The seller was looking for $130,000. A year into this sort of pandemic, I'm guessing he's loosened his grip, but I'm going to say $115,000, and it sells at $115,000, but the reserve might be higher than that. I might be wrong. So anyway, $115,000 is my bid, and that'd be a great deal for this car, because there's definitely a lot more invested in it.
Boy, I mean, I think the color alone just makes it something really pop out. This car was on Jay Leno's garage, so the right people are probably looking at it. But I am going to go a little soft and just go right at 100. I think maybe it breaks 100. Maybe it goes 105, but I'm going to say 100 and say it doesn't sell. You know, that's my guess. Because, I mean, this car looks like a $250,000 car driving down the road.
Yeah.
That's just,
and one day it will be, for sure.
All right.
I think it's a good place to put your money. All right,
let's get going. Great car. Moving on.
Moving on Bring a Trailer, we have a 1991 Nissan 300ZX twin turbo. This is a really cool car out of Scottsdale, Arizona, with just 50,000 miles on it. This car is a 5-speed manual, and that's noteworthy because many of them were made with automatics. It's got the T-tops, a limited slip differential, the pearl white metallic paint that was kind of the iconic color for this car, in my opinion. I feel like you saw a lot of them like this. You saw a lot of them in black. These were kind of the first cars that sort of held their value, I think, with sort of the sports cars. These were affordable alternatives to the European sports cars back in era. And it's interesting is the Supra, the RX-7, and even the Integra Type R have all taken off. And a car with this low miles and this kind of condition, if it were one of the other three, would be over $50,000 retail. And yet this car is sitting here in Scottsdale, a great area to pick up the car. No stories, no modifications, basically bone stock. And it's only at $22,500. So the question I have for you and for our audience is, when is the 300Z from this era going to have its day? When is one going to go at auction for $100,000 or $70,000, and then they come out of the woodwork left and right because everybody wants to cash in on the Fury? So maybe this is the car that goes really crazy. It's a no stories car. I still think it might make $40,000, but it might not, and it could be a tremendous value because sooner or later these cars are going to go for big money, I think. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, I don't know if this one's the one to make the big money at almost 50,000 miles. I mean, it really does seem like it's a beautiful example. I believe I drove the first one in the Northwest. I was a lot attendant at a Porsche, Volkswagen, Nissan dealer, and they sent me from Seattle down to Vancouver, Washington, which, if you know anything about the Northwest, it's like 150 miles. It's an all-day drive down there and back. Right? Yeah. It's basically like going down to Portland, and that's where the port is. That's where they bring all these in. And so the first twin turbo one came in, and there was a buyer for this car, and they needed me to go down, get it, bring it back up. So I got to drive this car, and it was like driving, I say it's a cliche to say it was like driving a spaceship, but it really was back then. This car, the interior of this car, that jet fighter cockpit was just like so modern for the time. And, everyone on the road was looking at me, and, I stopped. Of course, I took my time going home. I stopped at Dick's Drive-In. If you're from Seattle, you know what Dick's Drive-In is, to get some cheeseburgers. And I'm like, everybody knew what this car was, but it was the first time anyone had seen one, so it was just crowds everywhere. It was such a great car, and of course I absolutely fell in love with it. The T-tops, the power, all the things, and it was this color too. The thing that I remember, this was also like the first car with 300 horsepower and a 6-cylinder. That was like a big deal. The idea that you had a 1 horsepower per liter, essentially, it was like wow. It's just a terrific car. But I also remember talking to the techs at the dealership and remember them saying, this car, when it gets to 55,000 miles or whatever, and it's due for that 60,000 mile service, and it's time to change the spark plugs, it's a 10-hour job. This engine is very complex for a Nissan. For anything Japanese. Yeah, it is. And these cars were very cheap for a very long time. Kind of like 964s. 964s became very rare because they didn't make a ton of them. And they were cheap for so long that people abused them. They made a ton of these, but they've been very cheap for a long time, and enthusiasts have loved them because they are great cars. So now to find one as clean as this, 50,000 miles is really low miles for one. But it's not quite collector miles. So what does that mean for the value of this car? I think this is an absolutely stunning driver. 22.5 is, with 3.5 hours to go, that's pretty good money for a 300ZX turbo already. So what's your bid?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So my big question that I wrote is this a car going to break 40,000 or not? And to me, just at a glance, I think this should be a $45,000 car easily. And again, if it had lower miles and it was a collector, then you go $60,000, make a big jump. If this had like under 10,000 miles or something, but at 50,000 miles, I still think it's a nice example if it's not been hit, and yet you could drive it and put a few miles on it. You're not really going to damage the value. But I don't know. I'm shooting in the dark. I'm going to go $34,000.
Okay, so you're I mean, I'm with you. I think I mean, it should be a $45,000 car, but I don't think it's anywhere close to that yet. I think if a 300Z is gonna, if any Nissan has its time to break, it's the previous generation 300Z. Those late '80s ones, that '87 to '89, those last couple years of them, which are super super rare, especially. But anyways, we don't even want to get into that. But I think that's the next. You're seeing some pretty big numbers on those, but they made a S-ton of this model car.
Right.
They were super popular. So I think it's going to be a minute till one really starts to get that high money. And again, because of the miles. So I don't even think it's going to break 30, but I'll just bid 30.
Okay. There you go.
All right,
so and that could happen. All right, so let's jump over to cars and bid. Our dear friend John has selected for us what by today looks like a minivan that's got a lift kit. But this is, JP, I remember these cars in period. When they came out in '89, these were exotic. It was like looking at a Lamborghini go down the street. This was the Italian Laforza. And Doug Demuro tells us that name literally translated in other markets as, where did he write it down for me? Oh, my goodness. Rayton Fisore Magnum, which the name of this company in other markets around the world. But in the United States, they came in as Laforzas. Italian build, Italian leather, Italian coachwork, but a Ford F-150 V8. People thought these were really exotic. They showed up at car shows and Lamborghini dealers all the time. And everybody, I think, assumed that there'd be a simplicity to working on them because of the drivetrain being American. And that they would have big power. And none of that was true. These cars were built terribly. They were constantly in the shop. They never retained value. And particular V8 they decided to use, that F-150 had 185 horsepower and 270 pounds of torque. Not nearly enough to move around this 2.5-ton behemoth. This particular car is showing 18,000 miles. The true mileage is unknown. It's offered out of Sandy, Utah. And even the cover photo, the passenger door in the front looks like a different shade of light blue than the rest of the car. So hats off to the seller of this one. I hope you get rid of it. It's a no reserve auction. It's at $3,200 out of Sandy, Utah. One of the rare and not so collectible Laforzas.
So, this morning before the show, our producer, Patootie, produced one of these in the front yard. This has got to be the biggest pile of, oh my gosh. And, the reason, what we do on this show, people go, the top 5 picks, right? We pick the top 5 picks of the day on Cars and Bids and Bring a Trailer and bring those to you and discuss them. And we give our predictions on what the prices will be and all that sort of thing. And it's a good time, but people often mistake our intentions. Sometimes they think that we're picking the top 5 best cars on Cars and Bids and Bring a Trailer. But I think it's important to note that we specifically look for cars and vehicles that are maybe not the best, and maybe sometimes even the worst thing on all of the auction sites. And this vehicle absolutely fits the Cars and Bids ethos, right? It is a 80s, 90s enthusiast car. You have to be an enthusiast to want this pile of crap.
Or to have ever heard of it.
Or to have even know what it is. Absolutely. And I it's like, yes. And it also, I wanted to bring this car up because I wanted to discuss really quickly how important photography is, right? We are going to release a video very soon with our, top 5 tips on how to to shoot your car to get the most money for it on Cars and Bids and Bring a Trailer. And this guy, I feel bad because he didn't get to see our video. He released his car before. This car really has potential. I mean, it's a piece of dog crap, but there's a way to photograph this car to make it like, oh my God, I need that. That interior is just so ugly and awesome at the same time. Everything about this, I mean, how about washing the wheels, maybe for starters?
Seriously.
I mean, you know, it's just, good Lord, dude, take a little, anyways, yeah, the total hunk of crap. $3,200 right now with 2.5 hours to go, 12 bids. I'm shocked anyone's willing to, I mean, what's your bid?
I'm gonna go $3,800. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, where's this car gonna go? You are just asking for trouble with this. There you go. Good luck. It looks like it's out of the Soviet Union. It's so foreign.
It does have an East block. Yeah, put it in H.
Yeah.
I think, can you, I mean, what are the bid increments? I know on like Cars and Bids and Bring a Trailer, it's like usually $100 is the minimum bid increment, but I think it should be like $14 and a stick of gum. You know, this thing could go all day. What'd you say, $3,800?
$3,800. Yeah.
Jeez, hell, I'll go 4,000 just because, just to go over, because I think people are like,
because you picked it. Because you picked it.
Good Lord, what a hunk of junk. Fun car though. Let's, or at least fun to talk about. Let's go ahead and move on to what are we at? We were at the last car.
Yeah, we're at the last car. We're going to jump back over to Bring a Trailer. Just one last comment. It's amazing for me to remember how people like thought that was just a big deal back in the early 90s. A Laforza is seriously like an exotic car. Yeah. Anyways, on Bring a Trailer, we have a 1990 BMW 325i Coupe. Couple things. Normally an E30 platform car like this would get me very excited. This car has been owned by the same family for the last 10 years. It's a no reserve auction. The car is offered to us out of LA, California, and it only has 78,000 miles on it. However, this car is an automatic. This car has crappy cloth seats. And I normally, like, Volkswagen cloth seats from the same era are insanely cool. But these cloth seats are kind of gross. And then in particular, has a bad Carfax. At one point, this car was deemed in the state of California as a total loss. So there is no value to the paperwork you're buying on this car. My guess is some BMW head, some young kid has some big plans for this car, or somebody, some baller on a budget is going to buy it and just drive it to work every day. But, you know, the potential from the platform might be there if the frame's not bent. But this car was a total loss. So buyer beware. This could have been a really cool car. And I have to say, JP, off the bat, I'm shocked it's already at $7,700 considering the transmission and the Carfax. But there you go. At LA, California, an E30 coupe lacking the drivability that would make this car something you and I would be fighting over.
Yeah, okay. I'm with you on that Carfax issue, but these cars are so, what I would like to know, and I didn't read deeply into the ad, it's like, what was the total for? Because this car has not been worth much for quite a while, right? Even though on the enthusiast market, E30s have been worth quite a bit, but if you go on like a book value or an insurance adjuster's value, they're literally worthless. So you get backed into in a parking lot by someone in a Laforza that has no rear view mirror, and they dent
no insurance.
No insurance. They dent your fender, and it's $1,000 worth of damage or $1,500 worth of damage at the body shop. Well, that's a total loss on a car like this. So I'm speculating as to what caused this car to be a total loss. Was the damage really, really bad or not? I have no idea. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say maybe it wasn't that big a deal. The other thing that I think that makes this car particularly interesting, and it's not just the fact that it's a late model E30 BMW with the small bumpers and all the things that you want, the right steering wheel, all those great things, is the fact that unlike certain Porsches, this is a very, very, very easy car to convert from an automatic to a manual. It would take a mechanic that knows what he's doing, which, or even a decent mechanic, and not even one that really super knows BMWs. There's a lot of guys I know in back in the day that would go out and buy an $800 E30, pull the transmission out in a few hours, put in a 5-speed, like in a day or two, they've got a 5-speed E30, and now they've got a $4,000 or $5,000 car. That was a thing to do back in the aughts,
That's really cool, and that's something for like you and I. Yeah. That is nearly impossible to do with like a 928, where most of them are automatic, and it'd be cool to own if it had a stick. You'd think, wow, here's an automatic for $5,000. I could buy a gearbox and throw it in there. No, you can't. It's
anything with a Tiptronic on a Porsche, from a 964 all the way up, you're not converting it. I mean, it's just people think it's just exactly. But there's brains and computers and wiring harnesses. None of that stuff matches. This is a mechanical car. You take the mechanical piece off, you put a different mechanical piece on. There's no brain that has to reconcile what the hell's happening in the engine management. It's super, super simple. And this car with a 5-speed, even with the title, even with some of the negative things that go along with it. If it had a 5-speed, even if it wasn't an original 5-speed, now you're talking about probably a $20,000 car, maybe more with the way the market's going. Who knows? Because that would be an E30 with a 5-speed in this era is just one of the best drivers of all time. I mean, it's not an E30 M3, but you're talking about a quarter of the price. So
it's super fun car to drive, and it's got a cool factor.
Yep. You could be like Luke Wilson in Old School. He had an orange one. Okay, what's your bid?
Yeah, so I looked up the Carfax. It's an accident in Texas where it got hit in the front and the right. The airbags deployed and the vehicle had.
So that was a real accident.
It was a pretty bad accident. That being said, I still think there's a little room left in the car. I don't think it brings $10,000, so I'm going to say $8,900 as my bid for the E30.
Okay. I was gonna say like 9, so I'll give you a fighting shot and say 10.
Okay.
I think somebody wants this car because regardless of all those negative things, it really is a clean looking one, and talk about a fantastic driver. I have a 2006 325 manual, and honestly, I would probably trade that car for this car.
Yeah.
I mean, there it is. I would rather drive this E30 around every day than the one I have. And mine has low miles and it doesn't have a messed up title. So there it is. All right. Well, there's another episode of Bid Nerds. We do this every day at about 9 o'clock. We come to you with our top 5 picks of the day on cars and bids and bring a trailer. We discuss our predictions as to what those cars will sell for or not. And we want you and we encourage you to join us in the conversation. Let us know what you think. What are your predictions? Where do you think these cars will go? Let us know about the cars that you want us to review. We're just picking the cars ourselves right now, but we'd way rather only review cars that our viewers tell us to pick. So my name is John Polnick. Over there is Michael Deeb. We are the Bid Nerds. Join us tomorrow on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all the places. Smash the like buttons and all that. I hate that term, smash. Subscribe and like and all those things. And we'll see you tomorrow on Bid Nerds. Thanks, Michael Deeb.
Thank you, JP. See ya.